The Senate Judiciary Committee chamber buzzed with tension, its polished wooden panels and high ceilings amplifying every whisper. Television cameras, perched like vultures, captured the scene for a nation glued to their screens. Senator Cory, Booker, known for his commanding presence and sharp rhetoric, sat at the center of the dais, his eyes locked on the witness before him. Pam Bondi, former Florida Attorney General. Her poised demeanor and steely gaze hinted at a readiness that unsettled the room. This was no ordinary hearing. It was a battleground, and the stakes were monumental. Booker leaned forward, his voice steady but laced with an edge. "Ms. Bondi, your tenure in Florida raised questions about your commitment to impartial justice. Care to explain why your office dismissed cases tied to major political donors?" The accusation landed like a grenade, designed to rattle her and cement Booker's dominance. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Reporters scribbled furiously, sensing blood in the water. Bondi didn't flinch. Her lips curved into a faint, confident smile. "Senator, I'm happy to address that, but let's ensure we're discussing facts, not narratives." She reached for a sleek black binder, its presence on the table unnoticed until now. "I have documentation here that might interest you." The room stilled. Booker's brow furrowed, a flicker of unease crossing his face. What was she playing at? She opened the binder, pulling out a stack of papers. "These are records from my office, detailing every case dismissal you referenced. Each was reviewed independently with full transparency. But since we're on the topic of integrity, Senator, perhaps you'd like to address your own record." The air grew thick. Booker's jaw tightened, his fingers gripping the pen in his hand. Bondi's tone remained calm, almost surgical. "Specifically, your campaign's funding from certain advocacy groups tied to election oversight irregularities in 2020. The gallery gasped. Booker's face darkened, his voice rising. "Ms. Bondi, you're out of line. This hearing is about your conduct, not mine." He slammed his hand on the desk, the sound echoing like a gavel. The other senators shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between the two. Bondi's composure held firm, her gaze unflinching. "Senator, I'm simply responding to your line of questioning. If you'd prefer, I can provide the committee with these financial disclosures." She slid a document across the table, its contents obscured but its weight undeniable. Booker's allies on the committee, sensing the tide shifting, tried to intervene. Senator Harris leaned in, her voice sharp. "Ms. Bondi, stick to the question." But Bondi was undeterred. "With respect, Senator, I am. If we're discussing integrity, let's discuss it fully." She turned back to Booker. "Your campaign received $2.3 million from groups later investigated for voter roll discrepancies. Would you like me to read the names of those groups?" The chamber erupted. Reporters typed frantically, their live feeds buzzing with alerts. Booker's face was a storm of fury and calculation. He knew the cameras were rolling, capturing every second of this unraveling moment. "You're deflecting," he snapped, but his voice betrayed a hint of desperation. "This is a stunt, and I won't indulge it." Bondi leaned back, her expression serene but piercing. "No stunt, Senator, just facts. I have more if you'd like to continue." She tapped the binder, its contents a silent threat. The room hung on her words, the power dynamic shifting beneath the weight of her evidence. Booker's eyes burned with defiance, but a shadow of doubt lingered. Had he underestimated her? As the chairman called for order, the tension remained, electric. Bondi's binder sat like a loaded weapon, its secrets yet to be fully unveiled. Booker, for the first time, seemed off balance, his usual charisma strained. The nation watched, breathless, as the hearing teetered on the edge of chaos. What else did Bondi have? And could Booker recover from this ambush? The chairman's gavel struck again, a sharp crack that did little to quell the storm brewing in the Senate chamber. Eyes darted between Cory Booker, whose clenched fists betrayed his struggle for control, and Pam Bondi, whose calm exterior masked a predator's focus. The binder before her, its pages barely touched, loomed as a silent challenge. The nation, watching live, sensed the hearing was no longer about procedure. It was a duel, and the next move could draw blood. Booker straightened, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ms. Bondi, your theatrics are noted, but let's return to the issue at hand. Your record on election integrity is under scrutiny here, not mine." His voice carried a practiced authority, but the tremor in it was unmistakable. He glanced at the cameras, aware that millions were dissecting his every word. "You've made claims. Now substantiate them, or admit this is a distraction." Bondi's gaze didn't waver. She leaned forward, her voice steady and deliberate. "Senator, I'm not the one dodging questions. You asked about my record, and I answered with facts. Now, I've raised concerns about yours, and you're deflecting." She flipped open the binder, pulling out another document with deliberate precision. "This is a 2020 audit report from a nonpartisan election watchdog. It details discrepancies in voter rolls in 3 states. Discrepancies linked to groups that funded your campaign." The room inhaled sharply. Booker's face froze, his eyes narrowing as he calculated his response. "That report is speculative," he shot back, his voice rising. "It's been debunked, and you know it. You're peddling conspiracy theories to tarnish my name." He pointed at her, his gesture slicing through the air. The gallery stirred, some nodding in agreement, others whispering about Bondi's audacity. Bondi didn't blink. "Speculative, Senator? Then why did your campaign fail to disclose these contributions until after the audit was public?" She held up the document, its bolded figures visible to the cameras. $1.7 million from one group alone, funneled through shell organizations. "I have the bank records if you'd like to review them." Her tone was polite, almost inviting, but the implication was lethal. The chamber erupted in chaos. Senators murmured, aides scrambled, and reporters typed. Furiously, their headlines already forming. Booker's allies tried to regain control. Senator Durbin interjected, his voice stern. "Ms. Bondi, this is not a courtroom. You're here to answer, not accuse." But Bondi was unshaken. "With respect, Senator, I'm answering. If the committee values transparency, these documents should be entered into the record." Booker slammed his hand on the desk, the sound cutting through the din. "This is a smear. You're weaponizing half-truths to derail this hearing." His voice cracked with fury, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. The cameras zoomed in, capturing the sweat beading on his brow. He turned to the chairman. "I move to strike her statements. They're irrelevant and inflammatory." The chairman hesitated, his gaze flickering to Bondi's binder. "Ms. Bondi, can you justify the relevance of these allegations?" he asked, his tone cautious. Bondi nodded, her expression serene. "Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Election integrity is the core of this hearing. If Senator Booker questions my record, he must be prepared to defend his own, especially when evidence suggests otherwise." She slid another document forward, this one thicker, its pages marked with highlighter. "This is correspondence between your campaign and one of these groups, dated 3 months before the audit. Would you like me to read it aloud?" The question hung like a guillotine. Booker's face paled, his breath shallow. The room was a powder keg, and Bondi held the match. The chairman called for a brief recess, his voice barely audible over the uproar. As senators huddled and cameras panned, Bondi closed her binder with a soft thud, her eyes locked on Booker. He stared back, his charisma crumbling under the weight of her unrelenting evidence. The nation watched, hearts pounding, as the hearing teetered on the brink. What was in that correspondence? And how much more could Booker withstand? The recess stretched the Senate chamber's tension to a breaking point, the air thick with anticipation. Senators whispered in tight clusters, their glances darting toward Pam Bondi, who sat composed, her binder a silent sentinel. Cory Booker, isolated at the dais, conferred with an aide, his gestures sharp and urgent. The cameras, relentless, caught every twitch, every bead of sweat. The nation, glued to their screens, knew this was no mere pause. It was the calm before a storm. As the chairman reconvened the hearing, the room snapped to attention. Booker's eyes, bloodshot but defiant, fixed on Bondi. "Ms. Bondi," he began, his voice low and deliberate, "you've made serious accusations. I'll give you one chance to retract them before I dismantle this charade." His words were a calculated gamble, a bid to reclaim the narrative. The gallery leaned forward, sensing a counterattack. Bondi's expression didn't shift. "Senator, I don't make accusations lightly. I present evidence." She opened her binder with a slow, deliberate motion, pulling out the correspondence she'd teased before the recess. "This is an email, chain, dated July 2020, between your campaign manager and a director of a group tied to voter roll issues. Shall I read it?" Her voice was calm, but the challenge was unmistakable. Booker's face tightened, his fingers drumming the desk. "That's out of context," he snapped. "You're twisting routine communications to fit your narrative. This is a witch hunt." His voice rose, cracking with indignation, but the room sensed his desperation. Senators shifted uncomfortably, their loyalty to Booker tested by Bondi's relentless precision. Bondi held up the email, its text projected on a screen for all to see. "Routine, Senator? This email discusses strategic voter roll adjustments in key districts. Your campaign manager wrote, and I quote, 'We need to ensure our numbers hold no matter the cost. Care to explain?'" The words landed like a thunderclap. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Reporters typed furiously, their live feeds exploding. With alerts. Booker leapt to his feet, his chair scraping loudly. "This is outrageous. That email proves nothing. You're fabricating a scandal to discredit me." His voice shook, his fists clenched as he pointed at Bondi. "You have no proof of wrongdoing, just innuendo." The gallery buzzed, some spectators nodding, others murmuring about the email's damning clarity. Bondi remained unshaken, her voice cutting through the chaos. "No proof, Senator? Then let's examine this." She produced another document, a financial ledger, its rows highlighted in red. "This shows $500,000 transferred from that same group to your campaign's PAC days after that email. Coincidence?" Her question was a blade, slicing through Booker's defenses. The screen flashed with the ledger, its numbers stark and undeniable. The chamber descended into pandemonium. Senators shouted over each other, aides scrambled, and the chairman's gavel was a futile plea for order. Booker's allies tried to pivot. Senator Warren interjected, her tone sharp. "Ms. Bondi, this is irrelevant to the hearing's purpose. Move on." But Bondi was relentless. "With respect, Senator, if we're discussing election integrity, this is the heart of it. The committee deserves the full picture." Booker's face was a mask of fury and fear, his charisma eroded by Bondi's onslaught. "You're lying," he hissed, his voice barely audible over the uproar. "You won't get away with this." But his words lacked conviction, drowned by the weight of Bondi's evidence. The cameras zoomed in, capturing his unraveling for a nation to dissect. Bondi leaned back, her binder still brimming with secrets. "I'm not here to get away with anything, Senator. I'm here for the truth." She tapped the ledger, her eyes locked on Booker's. "If you'd like, I have more transfers to discuss." The threat hung heavy, a promise of further revelations. The room held its breath, the power dynamic now firmly in Bondi's grasp as the chairman struggled to restore order. The hearing teetered on collapse. Booker's political future hung in the balance, his every move scrutinized. Bondi's binder, a Pandora's box of evidence, remained poised to unleash more. What else did it hold? And could Booker find a way to turn the tide? The Senate chamber was a cauldron of chaos. The chairman's gavel a faint echo against the rising tide of shouts and murmurs. Cory Booker, his face etched with desperation, stood at the dais, his eyes burning into Pam Bondi. She sat unruffled, her binder open, its pages a silent arsenal threatening to unravel his career. The cameras, unblinking, broadcast every second to a nation riveted by the spectacle. The hearing, now a high-wire act, balanced on the edge of collapse, and the next move would decide who fell. The chairman, voice hoarse, finally restored a semblance of order. "Senator Booker, Ms. Bondi, we will proceed with civility," he warned, his eyes flickering to the binder. Booker seized the moment, his tone sharp but controlled. "Ms. Bondi, you've thrown around documents and accusations, but you've shown no direct proof of wrongdoing. This is a performance, not a hearing." He leaned forward, his gaze a challenge. "If you have something concrete, show it now, or stop wasting this committee's time." The gallery held its breath, sensing a last-ditch effort to flip the script. Bondi's lips twitched, not in amusement, but in resolve. "Senator, I don't deal in performances. I deal in evidence." She pulled a new document from her binder, its edges worn but its contents pristine. "This is a sworn affidavit from a former official in one of your donor groups, detailing instructions from your campaign to suppress voter fraud investigations in 2020. Signed and notarized." The room exploded. Senators gasped, aides froze, and reporters scrambled to capture the moment. Booker's face drained of color, his hands gripping the desk as if to anchor himself. "That's a lie!" he roared, his voice cracking. "That affidavit is fabricated. You're dragging innocent people into your vendetta." His words were fierce, but his eyes betrayed panic, darting to the cameras that immortalized his unraveling. Bondi's voice cut through the uproar, steady as steel. "Fabricated, Senator? This official is prepared to testify under oath. Would you like their name entered into the record?" She held up the affidavit, its text projected on the screen, each word a nail in Booker's defense. The document detailed dates, meetings, and explicit orders, its specificity chilling. The gallery buzzed, some spectators whispering about resignation, others about indictments. Booker's allies scrambled to intervene. Senator Blumenthal stood, his tone urgent. "Mr. Chairman, this is beyond the scope of this hearing. I move to adjourn." But the chairman, his face grim, shook his head. "The witness has the floor," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of the moment. Bondi nodded, her eyes locked on Booker. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also have text messages corroborating the affidavit sent from your campaign's deputy director. Shall I read them?" The question was a guillotine, and Booker knew it. He sank into his chair, his defiance crumbling. "You're destroying lives with this," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "This isn't justice." But the room was unforgiving, the cameras capturing his defeat in high definition. Bondi's expression remained impassive, but her words were relentless. "Justice, Senator, is what happens when truth meets accountability. If you'd like, I can provide the committee with the full communication log." The chamber was a tinderbox, every word from Bondi igniting fresh chaos. Reporters typed furiously, their headlines screaming of scandal. Booker's allies, now visibly shaken, huddled with aides, their whispers frantic. The public, watching. Liv flooded social media with reactions, some hailing Bondi's precision, others decrying her as ruthless. But no one could look away. Bondi closed the affidavit, her binder still brimming with untold secrets. "I'm here to answer your questions, Senator," she said, her tone almost gentle but laced with steel. "Do you have any more, or shall I continue?" The challenge was clear: surrender or face annihilation. Booker's eyes, hollow with defeat, met hers, but he said nothing. The room pulsed with tension, the nation waiting for his next move. As the chairman called for a vote on entering Bondi's evidence, the hearing hung by a thread. Booker's legacy teetered, his silence deafening. Bondi's binder, a vault of revelations, waited to strike again. Could Booker salvage his name, or was this the end? The Senate chamber was a crucible, its air heavy with the weight of impending judgment. The chairman's call for a vote on Pam Bondi's evidence hung like a blade over Cory Booker, whose silence screamed louder than any defense. His eyes, once fierce, now flickered with resignation, fixed on Bondi's binder, a relentless archive of his undoing. The cameras, unyielding, broadcast the scene to a nation transfixed, every heartbeat a drum roll for the verdict on Booker's legacy. The hearing, a battleground of truth and ambition, was reaching its climax. The chairman's voice, strained but firm, cut through the tension. All in favor of entering Ms. Bondi's documents into the record? Hands rose slowly, some senators glancing at Booker with pity, others with resolve. The vote was unanimous. Bondi's evidence, emails, ledgers, affidavits, would become part of the public record, a permanent scar on Booker's career. The gallery exhaled, a collective release of pent-up anticipation. Booker's head bowed slightly, his hands clasped tightly, as if to hold himself together. Bondi, her composure unbroken, closed her binder with a soft thud that echoed like a gavel. "Mr. Chairman, I have no further documents to submit," she said, her voice steady but carrying a quiet triumph. "I came to answer questions and provide clarity. I believe I've done so." Her words were a masterstroke, framing her onslaught as duty, not vengeance. The room, still reeling, absorbed the shift. Bondi had not just defended herself, she had redefined the narrative. Booker, sensing the end, rose unsteadily, his voice hoarse. "Ms. Bondi, you've painted a picture, but it's incomplete. I've served this country with integrity, and I won't let your selective evidence erase that." His words were defiant, but they lacked fire, a final plea to a room that had already judged him. He turned to the chairman. "I request a chance to respond fully in writing to these allegations." The request was a lifeline, a bid to delay the inevitable. The chairman nodded, but his tone was curt. "Granted, Senator, but the evidence stands." The words were a death knell. Booker sank back into his chair, his face a mask of defeat. The cameras zoomed in, capturing the fall of a titan. Reporters, their fingers flying across keyboards, churned out headlines. "Booker crumbles under Bondi's evidence. Senate showdown exposes senator's secrets." The nation, watching live, was a chorus of gasps and tweets, some mourning Booker's collapse, others celebrating Bondi's precision. Bondi, her mission complete, gathered her papers, her movements deliberate. She met Booker's gaze one last time, not with malice, but with the unyielding clarity of truth. "Senator, I wish you well," she said softly, her words a stark contrast to the devastation she'd wrought. The gesture was not mercy but mastery, a reminder that she had won not through theatrics, but through facts. Booker looked away, unable to bear the weight of her stare. As the hearing adjourned, the chamber emptied in a flurry of whispers and camera flashes. Bondi exited quietly, her binder tucked under her arm, a symbol of her unshakable resolve. Outside, reporters swarmed, but she offered only a brief statement. The truth speaks for itself. Her calm contrasted sharply with the chaos engulfing Booker, who remained inside, huddling with aides as his political future unraveled. In the days that followed, the fallout was seismic. Bondi's performance was lauded across networks, her preparation and poise hailed as a masterclass in accountability. Commentators dissected her strategy, praising her ability to turn Booker's aggression against him. Her evidence sparked investigations, with watchdog groups calling for further scrutiny of Booker's campaign. Social media buzzed with memes of her binder, a new icon of truth in a polarized age. Booker, meanwhile, faced a firestorm. His written response, released a week later, was dismissed as evasive, unable to counter Bondi's meticulous documentation. Allies distanced themselves, and constituents demanded answers. His once bright star dimmed, his name now synonymous with scandal. Though he vowed to fight on, the damage was irreparable, his legacy forever tethered to that fateful hearing. The confrontation became a turning point, a reminder that preparation and truth could triumph over charisma and power. Bondi emerged not just unscathed but elevated, her name etched in the annals of political lore. For the nation, it was a moment of clarity in a murky era, a testament to the power of evidence in the face of division. The binder had spoken, and its verdict was final.